Welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Our guest today, York Dore. We will talk some baseball. Our show is sponsored by the Well Coffee House, which is a Nashville area coffee house that provides fresh roasted coffee along with house-made pastries, breakfast, and lunch offerings. 5 locations to serve you in the Nashville area: Brentwood, Green Hills downtown, Bellevue, and the Cool Springs Lifeway. More info can be found at wellcoffeehouse.org. The Well Coffee House, where coffee changes lives. Our co-sponsor is WellSpire, Nashville's Learning and Development Center, located at the Gulch. Thanks to those guys as well. Our news today is sponsored by Sutherland and Belk, a family-owned injury law firm. If you or a loved one has been hurt in any type of accident, call Taylor or Russell at 615-846-6200 to see what your rights are and if they can help. Vanderbilt takes 2 of 3 in baseball from Illinois State, retains its number 1 ranking in most polls. Basketball, more bad news in a bad news season. The Commodores lose number 19 in a row at LSU. Vanderbilt will face Texas A&M in the SEC tournament on Wednesday. Our guest today, York Dore, as we talk some baseball. Our guest line sponsored by Vanderbilt fan Josh Minton, an independent insurance agent operating out of Brentwood, looking for a one-stop shop to take care of your insurance needs. Josh has you covered. Call him today at 615-933-1979. Email him at josh@hqinsurance.com. Follow him on Twitter at Joshua Minton HQ or on Facebook at facebook.com/JD Minton HQ. He's my insurance agent. Give him a try. Tell him you heard about it here. York Dore, thank you for joining us today. How are you, my man?
Doing well, and it was a good week for Vanderbilt baseball. I think things really came together very well. I know that it ended with a little bit of a sour taste, and one of those games that I you put an exclamation point on the end of it and say baseball, where it just seemed like the stars were aligned against us in the Sunday Game 2 finale. But for the rest of the week, I mean, it was a stellar week for Vanderbilt baseball. Right on cue with the takeaway from our podcast last Tuesday, right before the first game, we talked about, Pat DeMarco, just a matter of time before he snaps out of it. And boy, did he snap out of it this week. I don't actually have the full final line of numbers, but at one point, I think he had 3 doubles, 2 triples, and a homer, along with, something like 10 RBI and 5 or 6 runs scored. So just an outstanding week from him. You had really solid pitching and some dominating performances. Austin Becker on, I think it was Tuesday, came in through the last 3 innings of a 24-2 victory, and not oftentimes where someone comes in with a 20-run lead and he becomes the story. But man, did he look good. Fastball, curveball, changeup. This is a kid who, we haven't really basically seen pitch. He threw 2 live innings of intra-squad action from between the moment he set foot on campus and the moment the season opened this year. So it's really a kid that no one has really had eyes on, but he was fantastic. The bats really awoke. J.J. Bleday is just absolutely playing murder ball right now. Ethan Paul continues to really find barrels. Some of his balls out into left center end up being sac flies, but still really having just a phenomenal season. And also the catcher play this week was really outstanding. It wasn't perfect. There was in particular, I point to a pass ball yesterday, and also an early first or second inning wild pitch strikeout, which could have been better corralled. But the catcher play has been great between framing, throwing. I mean, Steven Scott had a throw yesterday, which was, Molina brother caliber, and Philip Clark had a throw from his knees in game 1, which was just eye-opening. So altogether, 4 in 1 week, rather, I should say. Haven't actually followed how all the polls shook out today, but I would imagine we're remaining number 1 in all the polls. We were number 1 in prior to this week, and notwithstanding the fact that the loss was the last game we played in the week. It was an outstanding week.
Okay, there's a lot that we know about this team. We know that the lineup is terrific. We know that there are a lot of talented arms on this team. I think at this point, there's no disputing all that. I want to hit on maybe 3 or 4 topics that maybe haven't been decided. And I want to start with who the number one starter, or excuse me, not the number one, but the number 3 starter is. Zach King, for the second straight week, really did not pitch well in that role. I have questioned whether he's the guy for that. I know why they would have tried him, but you go back to the Clemson Regional last year where I don't think he got out of the 5th. I think he gave him maybe 4 1/3. I'm just not sure that he is that guy compared to who they've got. Now, this is a very small sample size, and I'm not going to say that this definitively settles the argument, but we know Kumar Rocker is very talented. We have seen what the upside is for him. On Sunday, he pitches 4 innings and does not give up a run. Actually, he gave up 1, throws 50 pitches. Zach King throws 2 1/3, throws 62 pitches, gives up 5. I'm not saying argument settled just based on that, but I do have to think, in my mind, he's the best guy for that number 3 spot. But what do you think?
You know, so I think let's start with sort of who the candidates were coming into the season. And I think the 3 principal ones were going to be Zach King, Tyler Brown, and Kumar Rocker. I think Tyler Brown has established himself now well into the trusted end of game closer role. And, he had a rough first outing, but he's only allowed 1 free pass the entirety of the year and has really looked great in his last 4 or 5 outings. So, Tyler, I think, is going to be in the back of the bullpen, and I'm good with that. I neglected to mention, obviously, Mason Hickman, also a candidate. I think we're probably going to see Mason get a midweek start this week, and then probably with a short timeline, maybe a 4-inning outing, so that he can be ready to relieve over the weekend in Texas A&M. But I don't think Mason's going to be the guy for Sunday right now, just simply after having seen him get a Tuesday start. I think he's going to stay in the role he has been in, which is the flex guy. And that brings you to Kinger and Kumar. And also the other candidate I'd throw into the mix is Ethan Smith, although I don't see Corbs pulling him out of what has become a trusted sort of pre-closer reliever role. He wasn't great, but he wasn't terrible on his appearance on Sunday, but he's been lights out basically for a week and a half, other than a little bit of scuffling yesterday. So that brings you down to Kumar, Kinger, and to me, listen, Kumar didn't throw for we counted it out, Chris. What was it, 12 days?
Something like that. Yeah.
I was going to start asking questions if he hadn't appeared yesterday. He did appear. I called him Punxsutawney Kumar on Twitter because his appearance showed that there's only 1 more week of winter left because the kid brings straight fire. He looked great. And the question I have, which we still haven't really seen, is how is he going to be extending beyond 3 innings? Because I think the most we've seen him for is 3 innings so far, both in the fall and now. Can he hold the velocity? Can he hold the location? Because clearly he's got the highest upside on the team. Weirdly enough, I'm sort of coming around to the idea that Hugh Fisher might be number 2 in upside. But I think Kumar's got the highest upside on the team, and I know we haven't seen enough of Austin Becker to know if he's right there as well. But Kumar's upside is through the roof, and I don't know. Maybe we see him on Sunday. Maybe we see Zach again. Maybe we see Mason if he doesn't get an extended outing in this midweek. But it's still a question, and not necessarily. The worst question to have is throwing up a TBA and having people available situationally, much as Corpse does with DH.
Well, the question that sort of follows the number 3 is what do you do in the midweek? And Chance Huff, certainly he's not blown up in that spot. He's been fine. I still think that after 60 or 70 pitches, you really have to watch him. But I am curious to see who gets the majority of the starts from here on out in that role, because You got him. You got Austin Becker being flat out phenomenal earlier in the week, as you noted. You got Ethan Smith as a guy who maybe could fit in that role. You got Mason Hickman. I'm going to be curious to see what the breakdown of midweek starts is going to be here on out.
Yeah, and I always sort of thought that we'd see something similar to 2011, which is midweek by committee. I think it hasn't really played out that way as of yet. Part of the reason why may be that we've had a number of 5-game weeks, and 5-game weeks are harder to be more democratic because you just have so many innings that you got to eat up over a consecutive day basis. I mean, if you're playing, 9 games or 8 games over a 10-day period, you've got to extend people a little bit when you can. And but as we move into 4-game weeks, I think we'll possibly see more midweek outings that are really divvied up. But I think Corbin also, has to be feeling a little burned from last year when midweek performances were just so dreadful that you've got to really put your best foot forward because you can't lose all of those RPI stinging games, particularly the home ones and the neutral ones at First Tennessee. I'd also note that last year it wasn't just the pitchers who pooped the bed in midweek play. The batters also tended not to do well against subpar starters, and that's something to continue to watch as well. People who are used to facing high levels of heat, what happens when they face someone who's throwing 84 and junk, and that remains to be seen. Notably, I don't think that was the case actually in Game 2 yesterday. I think in Game 2 yesterday, the offense just didn't really catch a lot of breaks. A little more instance of RISP fail, runners in scoring position fail, but principally I chalk it up to a couple of lefties that came in and did a really nice job against a lefty heavy lineup, and that's one thing we've sort of been concerned with all year is Vanderbilt exposed to an elite lefty, and I'm trying to recall if I think he's Greek, and I can't say his name. Doxakis, I think, is a lefty for A&M, or Lacey. I don't recall which.
Well, let's talk Vanderbilt before we get into A&M, which we may, if we have time at the end of the podcast. I think one thing that's been debated on the board is Drake Fellows, and there's no doubt he's a good SEC pitcher. I think the question has been, is he a number one, say maybe top half, top third of the league? And there are times that he looks good. The slider has been particularly effective this year at times, but there's times where he hits those rough spots. I think you've noted a lot of times he hits it in the first inning, and then also last year seemed to be the fifth or sixth where he would really get pounded just all of a sudden after maybe 80 or 90 pitches. You saw the best and worst of him on Friday night. He gives up base runner, grand slam to start the game, then goes 6 innings without giving up any other runs. Kind of, in a way, encouraging that he bounced back the way he did, but also discouraging that we saw that flash of inconsistency again. What is your take on him at this point? Is he a top half, maybe top third of the SEC starter? Because I don't know in terms of comparing him to other number ones across the league.
Yeah, so it's the SEC. When you're talking about comparing an SEC ace, you're looking at guys like Tanner Burns. You're looking at guys like, frankly, Sonny Gray, people who are the best of the best. And no, Drake's not that because he's not consistent enough. That said, I think I'm reasonably happy with him as a Friday starter because I know he's a gamer. And notwithstanding the fact that whether it's just the way his body responds or maybe an issue of some kind of focus, he's a kid who tends to rise to the occasion. And that's a pretty big thing. He responds to stress, gets himself out of situations that he sometimes puts himself in. But I'm not too worried about him. I mean, he's off to a not great start for his junior year with respect to everything except for strikeouts. But the strikeouts demonstrate that the stuff is there, and for the most part, it's just a wandering mind or wandering performance or something. But all in all, he's been nothing but a successful pitcher in his career. 13-7 in his career, ERA of 3.88, which has been inflated a bit this year. And he's a guy with experience, and he's a guy who's going to fight and keep you in a game. Would I prefer Tanner Burns? Sorry, Drake, I would, but we don't have Tanner Burns.
Okay, other question. Jake Eder has been lights out in spots. Tyler Brown has been really consistent since that bad first performance, and he's throwing strikes. He's not giving up a lot of hard contact compared to the way that he used to. Now, some of that is opposition. My question to you is, if you have to pick one of the two guys to close a big game right now, and let's just say that the first four batters, two lefties, two righties, so we take the platoon advantage out of it, who do you go with?
I think they're very data centric in the baseball program, and they do a lot of research. And I think I might queue it up based on what I would expect as far as premier pitching. There are some teams that are better fastball hitting teams, and there are some teams that are more balanced. And if it's a more balanced approach, I'm probably throwing Jake Eder. And if it's a team that feasts on fastballs, I probably want Tyler Brown's ability to mix in the slider and work it that way.
Okay, let's shift to offense. Of course, we saw both Harrison Ray and Jason Gonzalez this weekend because of the suspension to Austin Martin. By the way, I made some phone calls this afternoon. People concerned about him being gone for an extended period of time. I think that's going to be unfounded. I think we will probably see him for the A&M series. I'm not going to promise that. I've not heard it for fact, but I don't think he's going to be out too much longer. So with that, when you get Austin Martin back, New York Dore, you've got Harrison Ray has had a lot of at-bats. You've got Jason Gonzalez has had a lot of at-bats. Is that a platoon situation, or do you pick one of the two guys and go with them?
That's a tough call is what it is. I think both of them have been quite good without stellar results. What I will note is that Harrison really surprised me. I thought he played second base very well over the weekend, and I didn't necessarily anticipate that. I think he's a better second baseman than he is third baseman. I think Jason had a decent weekend. He looks so much better at the plate this year than last. It hasn't really translated into significant results early, but he's not a kid you throw 5 pitches to and you see him walking back struck out like he was last year. He's more of a threat, more of a force, and someone who I think if he got a lot of at-bats would produce pretty significantly for this club. I mean, he is hitting .333, which is higher than I actually anticipated, with a .922 OPS. Harry's up to .294 with a .700 OPS. So, both of them are producing. Harry in particular just absolutely eviscerated a ball yesterday that almost like he punched a hole in the left field wall yesterday on a double. But I don't know. I think it's probably a field game when it comes to Corpse with respect to who he plays at third for the foreseeable future.
Okay, one more question, then I've got to run because I'm going to go see Chris McElwain play, who will be in a Vanderbilt uniform next year if they get him through the draft. So let me ask you this. You have 3 guys who can catch capably. You have Infante at first, who gives you a lot of things defensively. There's big-time upside with the bat if it comes through. How do you break down the reps at first and behind the dish from here on, given the options that you have?
Well, I think you probably continue to underplay Ty Duvall, which he's got a 158 average in 19 at-bats, which is probably the most deceiving 158 average that you will ever see because he just has hit into some tough luck. He hits line drives. That's what he does. And he's a pretty decent catcher. But to be frank, I've sort of been gobsmacked at just how good Phil Clark has looked behind the plate. He's actually been slumping a little from the batter's box, but he's been doing outstanding work catching. I think you'll continue to see some kind of a platoon of Clark as the primary catcher, and then either Scott or Duvall sliding in to try and get some at bats. As the roster gets back to being fully healthy and fully active, it's going to be harder to get Duvall at bats, particularly to be frank, also because Walker Grisanti just had the midweek of his life. I think he went 2 for 2 on Tuesday, and then he went and basically Barry Bonds on Wednesday. Ended up a homer short of the cycle, but just absolutely tasered everything. So it's nice problems to have. That's what I'll say. I don't know. I think Clark's still the primary catcher. Scott, to the extent that I do think that we're going to see Scott play first against right-handed pitchers. I think it makes sense. You maximize that lineup, and then you still have the ability to bring in Infante or Duvey situationally. I do think Julian is a better first baseman. I don't think there's any controversy over that. He's a bigger target. He's a better target, better hands. But I think you got to get Scott in the lineup, and if you're facing a righty, you put him at first, and you try and maximize that offensive leverage.
Okay, quick thoughts on A&M for the weekend. I've not seen them play. I've seen a few stats. I know that they are pretty good on the mound. I think the pitcher's name is John Duxaxis, their ace. I think that's how I've heard it pronounced before, which does not mean they got it correct. Asa Lacey's been really good. I think that they've got some arms there. Their hitting is what's not come through. I don't know what Braden Shoemake has done so far, but he kind of took a step back after that freshman year last year just a bit. But your thoughts on the matchup with A&M before we close the podcast today?
Well, first, I think we all know that Shoemakes have had a rough month, whether it's him at the plate or Nike in Cameron Indoor. But I was a really bad attempt at a joke. I apologize, Chris. Sometimes I just try too hard. The story with Texas A&M is 1-2 punch. I mean, Vanderbilt is going to get smacked in the face by one of the 2 or 3 premier 1-2 punches in college baseball. Duxakis and Lacey are, first off, they're both lefties. So there's your immediate present question of, will dominant SEC caliber lefties cause havoc on this lefty heavy lineup? And it's one of the reasons why it's actually somewhat imperative that, A, Austin Martin get back in the lineup, and B, Pat DeMarco continue this upward trend that he's had this week, is that, we're going to be facing 2 of the best left-handers in the country back to back. I think they have a combined ERA of under 1, and it's rather significantly under 1. And, that's going to be a real challenge, particularly when you factor in the fact that, the pitching staff hasn't exactly held people at bay. We've done what we've done principally on bludgeoning teams to death. And it's uncertain, how Vanderbilt will respond in a game where they're down 1-0 in the 7th, and it's being handed from an elite lefty starter to an elite closer. So we'll see. It's, if you had to ask me what the best 1-2 punches in the SEC are, it probably starts with Duxakis and Lacey. Then it goes to probably Small and Ginn at Mississippi State, and depressingly have to admit that at least for the early season, you probably then go to Stallings and Lingenfelter in that bus stop to the east. So, I don't know where Fellows and Raby come in. They're not that far behind, but they're not, at least right now, on both functioning on the truly elite caliber like those trios have. That trio of duos have, I should say.
New York Dore, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to grabbing you next week once SEC play has started. He's New York Dore. I'm Chris Lee, the host of the Vandy Sports Podcast. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you again next week.